Right, so let's get started. We've got a really exciting talk today. I'm very happy to introduce Professor Devis Tuia from the Ecole Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. And his talk is on machine learning supporting ecology, supporting machine learning. It's an awesome title. So first up, I'd like to thank our tinyML Talks strategic partners, Aeon Devices, ARM, Deep Light, Edge Impulse, EMSA, PhotoHub, Greenwaves Technologies, Gravetti Incorporated, HOTG, Imagimob, Itemis, ClickerTech, Latent AI, Maxim Integrated, Micro AI, NXP, Prophecy, Qualcomm, Kixo, Reality AI, Renesas, Rexen, SAP, Seed, sensingML, Sony Semiconductor Solutions Corporation, ST, Stream Analyze, SynSense, and Sentient. And if you'd like to sponsor an upcoming talk, please drop an email to olga@tinyml.org for more information. I just realized I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Daniel Sitanaika. So I don't know if anyone in the audience was at the tinyML Summit this year or the Research Symposium. It was absolutely fantastic. It was at the Hyatt Regency San Francisco Airport a couple of weeks ago. Really amazing talks, really amazing sessions that are all going to be available on tinyml.org and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/tinyml very soon. So very exciting. We want to call out our online communities where you can go to learn more about events and stuff that's happening around tinyML and to discuss tinyML with others. So we have our meetup group, which has 8.9 thousand members in 45 groups in 35 countries. So it's big and it's growing. It's really cool to find your local group and get involved. We also have a tinyML community on LinkedIn, which has 2.7 thousand members and 6.1 thousand followers. So really good places to connect with other people who are involved with tinyML, especially near you. Another really awesome thing to do is subscribe to our tinyML YouTube channel. So this is where we post all of the videos from these sessions. It's an amazing resource for learning about the latest research in tinyML and the latest applications. So we've got 363 videos, which is amazing. 6.4 thousand subscribers, 192,000 total views. This video will be posted here after the session. So this is a fantastic resource for if you have some spare time and want to learn about tinyML. So our next talk upcoming is on Friday, May the 6th from Manivanan S., who's the lead engineer on the computer vision platform Valeo. And his talk is on Industry 4.0, predictive maintenance using Arduino Portenta H7 and Edge Impulse. So the talk's going to start at 7 a.m. Pacific time. And if you have an idea for a talk that you would like to do, please drop us an email at talks@tinyml.org. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Devis Tuia. So Devis completed his PhD at the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, where he studied kernel methods for hyperspectral satellite data. He then traveled the world as a postdoc, first at the University of Valencia, then at CU Boulder, and finally back to EPFL. In 2014, he became assistant professor at the University of Zurich, and in 2017, he moved to Wageningen University in the Netherlands, where he was chair of the Geoinformation Science and Remote Sensing Laboratory. Since September 2020, he's back to EPFL, where he leads the Environmental Computational Science and Earth Observation Laboratory, ECEO, in Sion. There he studies the Earth from above with machine learning and computer vision. So thank you, Devis. I will let you take it from here.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you, Evgeny and Olga, for inviting me, and thank you everybody for being here today and attending this talk, which I mean, I guess you see it's maybe a little bit different talk to the usual one you can you're usually seeing, and we will be talking basically on about ecology and how machine learning can help supporting ecological research and action, and then on the way back how ecology can then be useful to improve the models we use in machine learning and computer vision. So yeah, I'm Devis. I'm in Switzerland at the EPFL, and I'm very happy to spend this half hour plus with all of you. And yeah, feel free to drop in questions whenever you like. And at some points over the talk, I'll see if there are some questions and try to have some kind of interactions. Anyway, so today we talk about ecology and how the biodiversity crisis is basically about to hit us as humanity. And so as a start of the talk, maybe it's not the most happy start for a talk, but I don't know if you have been following the whole debate about the biodiversity crisis, but there is a high risk that a significant amount of species will be extincted in more or less 30 years' time. And as you can see here in the graph on the right, it's pretty much up to us how strongly this disappearance of species will hurt. So it can be like very, very bad if we do know nothing about it. So let's say if we move down the gray slope, or if we have some conservation efforts, we could be a little bit luckier and be on the orange slope. Or if we together with the conservation effort, we also a little bit better in how we consume and how we use the resources and how we treat the different habitats. We might even be lucky and be able to preserve the current state of populations of animals and plants in the world. For now, I must admit, we've not been extremely good at it. So we're mostly on the gray slope, if I must say. And of course, this might seem like nothing, but basically species, animals are very, very useful for our well-being. It's not just because they're nice to watch and nice to see, but it's also because they help us a lot in our food system, for example. So in terms of pollination and the food availability, they transport seeds, they ensure crop variety. Some species are very good at detoxification of the waste or purifying the air or the water. So actually, we do want to have variety of the species. And so by having these biodiversity collapse, we're basically also going through a very risky situation for humanity at large. So after this couple of minutes in this talk, I hope you're not asking yourself, what am I doing here? So I am in a tinyML seminar. I am not on a biology class. And of course, this might sound a little bit off topic, but at the same time, you can think how important it is to support conservation efforts. And as data scientists, so like people who use computer vision and machine learning, we can actually be of a great help for people who on the ground are trying to make a change and have an impact on the preservation of biodiversity. For example, conservation actors like rangers or ecologists are in the field and they're working very hard to protect the population. You can see here one image like this. These are the rangers are all Pejeta in Kenya, and they fight against poachers and try to protect populations. And they do that on the ground. But so if they can know where the threats are and what they need and where they need to focus their efforts, this will be like a really game changer for them. Because up to now, most of the conservation efforts are still done by hand. So we have very, very small data samples, and the usage of technology is usually very limited. And now that we are starting to have all this interesting data that are at our disposal, well, also the processing of the data is not so evident, so that at the end of the day, we tend to lag behind in terms of processing data, so that when we have the actual answer we're looking for, it's probably too late. So this is where we come in as data scientists, and this is why I would like to focus this talk. And I would like to focus it in two main things that are the 2 points I just mentioned. So the first is that conservation actors do a lot of things by hand, so we can be there for them and help them having a smarter data collection, rather than, you know, flying on a helicopter on a reserve and counting visually and then extrapolating. And then in second part of the talk, we talk about how we can develop better data processing routines that are rooted in machine learning and computer vision, so that we can give this actionable products that conservation actors need to basically be effective in protecting nature in their everyday life. So part number one is about the collection of the data. So, you know, we try to put together all these different sources of data and data collection action that were going on worldwide in the nature conservation community in a joint community paper that you can see here referenced. And in this paper we were talking about a wide number of sensors that are used in nature conservation. Of course, today I cannot go through all of them, so I decided to go through one specific example where I want to see how we run these research campaigns in an efficient way so that we were ready to produce this product of interest for nature conservation. And this will be about using drones to help the data conservation actions. So we were working in a place that is the Cusicus Nature Reserve, which is located here, where you can see the pin, and it's in Namibia. And it's a region where there is a private park, a game park called Cusicus, and where they have several conservation actions that are related to, one, estimating the amounts of food the animals have to sustain themselves, and secondly, they need to know where are the population located, because they need to make sure that they can prevent poachers coming in and killing the animals, because they will be interested, for example, by the horns of the rhinos. So one thing that they really need to know is how many animals they have in the reserve and where they are. So when we first started to talk with them, the idea was to develop a system that automatically will count and locate animals in the natural reserve. And so we thought about creating a system that would be based on a drone. So you need to imagine the reserve of Cusicus with something like that. So this is an actual picture of Cusicus. So it's an incredibly beautiful place in Namibia, and you have all these herds of animals running around. And the thing that we started to imagine with the conservation on the ground was to basically use a system that would be based on cameras that were very, very cheap. So something that could be deployed easily on the field in the African context, where we cannot go extremely crazy with the type of hardware that we use. And then to use a drone, in this case, a SenseFly AB, that it's a drone that is not too expensive. So it's a few $1,000s for the drone. It's a drone that is easily fixed if it crashes. It's made of foam, so it's very simple to basically replace parts when it gets broken, and basically to use this hardware to plan flights and to image the entirety of the reserve in a time that is reasonable, so that the identification of the animal gets done by some kind of machine learning based software that we will see in a second. So we went there in 2014, and we basically flew the entire reserve with a drone, and then we brought back home a hard drive full of images, and then we thought that the work was basically done. But then we started to see a couple of issues. So the first one is that the animals were not so simple to see. So if you look at these pictures that you have been seeing for a few seconds, maybe you can tell me how many animals you see. So you can maybe write it in the chat or in the Q&A and get your estimation of how many animals we are, and I will be monitoring. So I see some 7 going on, some 8. Okay, cool. So very well. So basically, I think that everybody has seen these animals here, no? These 5 are very easy to see. I'm pretty sure some of you have seen those 3. These are okay, visible. So let me see the chat if someone says more. So I have a couple of 10, but actually you will be surprised to know that there are actually 17 animals on the image that you can see now in blue. So you see, some of these animals are actually very difficult to see. And it was not so simple to just get the images and get to some of these animal counts, because sometimes they hide below the trees, sometimes their fur looks a little bit like the ground, and in the vast majority of images, there is just no animals to be seen. So you see, our animals are small, they are scarce. So imagine in the tens of thousands of images we are looking at, maybe 3/4 are just empty, there are no animals. And also there is an extra problem, is that not only the animals are heterogeneous in appearance, because every animal has a different type of fur and a different size, but actually the landscape is also very, very different. So these are actual pictures from the dataset we had, and it's for the same campaign. So you see, sometimes you are in a dirt area, sometimes you have vegetation, so sometimes you're over a river, so it's water. So like it gets extremely difficult, and the variability of background is sometimes much, much bigger than the variability you have of the species themselves. So basically, we realized that it was not so simple to do it, and we didn't only need to buy a drone and to fly it around, but basically we needed to do something more intelligent to process the images in a way that we could basically spot all the animals automatically. And to do that, I mean, imagine you see where I'm starting to get machine learning, images, drones. You see where this is going. Actually, the big question was, if we want to learn a machine learning model, so a deep neural network, for example, we will need to have a lot of annotation of good quality, and we would like to have it in a timing that was more or less reasonable. So we basically developed an app that was working on mobile phone, on tablets, and that would basically connect to a crowdsourcing experiment that we had when we invited people that were concerned by nature and wanted to make a contribution, to basically start looking at the images. And when they were looking at the images, they could basically click on the animals and add some drawings in order to give us training samples. And by doing so, we had this algorithm we co-developed with the people of AIDR in Qatar, and basically it was based on active learning. So the images that were shown to the people were ranked according to interest criteria, for example. And we gathered in a 2 days experiment a community of roughly 300 volunteers, and we could have in 48 hours the ensemble of 26,000 images labeled by at least 5 digital volunteers per image, which basically gave us a training set that was big enough to start to do some learning, and in a quite reasonable time. And so we gathered a data set that looked a little bit like the image you can see here at the bottom, where we had all these images for our drone footage and the single annotation of every volunteer that you can see here in red. So every polygon corresponds to one person drawing, and then we try to rule out the annotation that were done by only one person. Like this one, for example, is not an animal, and one of the volunteers just decided that it was. So we could rule that out by using some kind of confidence measures. And by doing so, we gathered a data set that we could use for actually developing first like traditional machine learning back in the days, and more recently some deep learning algorithms for the automatic detection of the animals. And I will talk about it in a second. I just wanted to then give a shout out to other projects that also are pursuing a similar path. There will be, for example, Wildbook. That is a project that mines YouTube videos and social networks to find footage of animals, and then mines the comments and text coming with the animals themselves to create a data set of single individuals of animals. Or eBird and iNaturalist, that are portals where people just take pictures with the mobile phone of species that they find of interest in, and they upload it on a portal that then gets geographically referenced. And these portals are very successful. So if you see here the iNaturalist portal, as I consulted it yesterday, we had roughly 40 million observations of animals and plants all over the world. And imagine all the learning that you can do with this data by knowing where the different species are observed, where they can thrive. And so it's a type of data set that a single individual could never collect by itself, but using what we call the wisdom of the crowds, that's definitely something that becomes, let's say, machine learning ready, and from which we could do some extrapolation of the different habitats where animals are feeling well. So it's not just data collection, don't get me wrong. So there is a lot of machine learning involved here, either in the design of the data acquisition process, where there is a lot of active learning involved. So when you go through a collection, how you rank the images, and how you rank the different species that you ask volunteers to label. And you also have a lot of learning going on the characterization and ranking and the usage of the data of the annotator. So if you can learn about the annotators, maybe you can learn what they're good at, and you can give them tasks that are more adapted to their skills, and so on and so forth. So you see, collecting this type of data is difficult, and it implies a lot of machine learning knowledge that is not in the image analysis itself, but it's more on how you organize and rank the data collection process. Okay, so do you have maybe a question, or I mean, feel free to, Daniel, feel free to ask me if there are questions in the chat. Otherwise, I continue. But if there is something,
yeah, we don't have any right now. I can always ask one.
Okay, yeah, so, go ahead.
Yeah, where do you think the biggest challenge is right now with deploying this technology? Is it a technology issue, a data issue, expertise issue?
So in creating this type of portals, I mean, there is an issue of quality control a little bit, because you know, the people that upload data on those portals have different degrees of expertise, and so there is a number of things that are related to the knowledge of experts that could easily label different images into species, and so up to which level to show this image to actual expert, or up to which level you leave it to the person who uploaded itself. There are problems of biases related to the location of people. So if I'm very enthusiastic about uploading on iNaturalist, I will just keep uploading pictures, like 10 pictures of the same bee. While and this has a risk of biasing a little bit the features you can extract on bees or images of bees, because they all come from the same region of the same individual. So there is all this kind of debiasing questions that are very, very important, I think, when you construct a crowdsourcing environment.
Yeah, so related question from the audience. What are the probabilities of inaccuracies in crowdsourced data?
That's a very good one. So from our experience in the Cusicus data, I will say that since the task was relatively simple, the accuracies were pretty good, because the animal were quite distinct and they were on a background where they were very visible. So the accuracy of the data we got was pretty good. Now, on environments that are more challenging, this can drop very quickly. And then you really need to rely on multiple annotators working at the same time, because otherwise you end up with a data that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but the key is always asking simple questions will get you better data. That if it's a task that anybody can solve, if it's a task that requires high-level expert knowledge, then it will be a disaster.
That makes sense. Okay, another question from the audience. Can you use the motion of animals to exclude plants?
Definitely. I mean, if you can afford flying several times over the same place, yes. So it's always a kind of a trade-off between the amount of ground you can cover and the data you are able to process. So yes, if you can fly twice every place on a sufficient time lag, that's a very good change detector. Yeah.
So a couple more questions. So one is, I've seen an approach to animal counting in the forest of Gir, India, where they count the number of lions manually. In tropical dense forests, how would drone technology work for counting?
Not so well. So things that you cannot see in the image, you cannot detect. So that I've seen research in drones that are better at navigating in forests, but this also works in forests that are not too dense. I mean, the moment you cannot enter the forest, there is not much you can do. So maybe at that moment you want to work mostly with proxies of habitats rather than observing the animal itself, because the moment the animal hides, you can work maybe on thermal signature, but then you need to operate at night. Because otherwise the thermal gradient it's not sufficient. Like where we work in Namibia, we cannot work with thermal image, for example, because it is so hot that we will not be able to record the thermal signature of the animal, and it's not advisable to be out at night to fly the drones for several reasons of operating the drone and getting eaten by lions. So it's like the two things we prefer not to happen to our people on the ground. Yeah.
So another question, what would be your opinion on using a swarm of stationary sensors versus drones for data collection?
I mean, if you can take them up in the air for long enough, yeah, why not? I mean, that's an excellent idea, but you need to have something that flies constantly, then you have maybe problems of battery at some point. It also depends on the scale of the time scale you want to measure. If you just want to have one snapshot and you can afford multiple drones, yes, you go with the drones, with the swarm, you cover the entirety of the reserve and you take a picture. Then you also avoid problems of like double counting, which is things that we observe a lot in our cases. Like when the drone flies, when it comes back to the same place, maybe the animals have moved and you count it twice. So there are things like that happen as well. Okay,
awesome. That's all the questions for now.
Cool. So feel free to ask them in the chat as I go, and I really like to have it interactively. Okay, so now we have been looking at the images, and we have a bunch of those. Now let's try to do something about it. And again, I will again resort to our perspective paper that is referenced here. So the idea is that once you have those images, there is a bunch of things that you can do to model this reserves, these natural reserves, and you have a number of tasks that maybe for us who are more machine learning friendly people, so you can start doing detection, which are the pink squares you can see at the bottom of the zebras. You can do localization. You can characterize species. You can identify single individuals. For example, with the zebras, that's a typical thing. Now, depending on their stripe pattern, you can even identify like Peter and Hans and all the different individuals. You can do posture estimation, as you can see here on the orange skeleton, or 3D reconstruct the trees in the forest. So all these things you can do in the same environment, and all together they can collaborate to have a better description of the interaction of the wildlife in the natural reserves. So again, as before, we cannot cover everything. So I went for one of them, which is probably the most immediate, which will be the detection of the animals themselves. So remember, we had our natural reserves in Namibia, as before. We have been flying our drones, and the thing that we want to do is basically, put bounding boxes around all these nice little animals. So you can see here an example of a potential product that we would like to have after we have trained our system based on a learning algorithm that will use the image we acquired and the annotations that we had, thanks to all these volunteers that were clicking images for us. So that's basically it. So it's a model that maybe has no real near secret for any of us. We have a model that starts with an image, learns a representation from the images, and then learns from a response, which is our volunteers clicking on the animals. So the image looks like this. These are the probabilities that came from the volunteers, and here in the middle we have a deep neural network. So it's a deep neural network that has a trunk that is pre-trained on something quite standard, a ResNet 18. I mean, we don't need something incredibly big for this type of problems. And then a couple of layers that are more specialized to detect the animals themselves. So, I mean, it might seem that like the magic is gone, no? you probably all know how to train to fine-tune a ResNet, and so it might seem that we have solved the problem. But actually, if you connect this to the initial problem of annotating the animals themselves, you might have realized that there are a couple of problems here. So we have roughly 1,000 animals in the data set, and we have 654 big images, which correspond to 26,000 crops that enter our deep learning model. We want to do semantic segmentation, which means that we have a little bit more than 500,000 of pixels that belong to the animals, and so where the comments like several millions, if not billions, of pixels of background. So the problem is incredibly unbalanced, and it's something that deep nets are not very good at. So we had to come up to a number of tricks, let's say, to train the deep neural network in a way that makes sense, so that we will be able to detect the animals in a very accurate way, and that will adapt well across environments, because you remember that the backgrounds tend to change a lot. And we resorted to 5 different tricks, that's some of which I'm sure you know. For example, image pre-training on ImageNet. That's okay. We download the ResNet pre-training on ImageNet, and then we have all the low-level features that are there for us. And then we had to go to some more specialized tricks that would be, for example, some class weighting, so giving more importance to pixels that belong to animals with respect to those that are background, because it's the vast majority. And then some that proved to be very, very important, like curriculum learning. So curriculum learning is basically that we start learning only with images where we knew there were animals for a few epochs, so that the model started to learn representations of the animals themselves, and we're not bothered by images where there was absolutely nothing to detect. And when the representation of what an animal looks like is learned by the model, then we give the full data set, where the majority of the image is basically empty. So we kind of schedule the learning in a way that we start with a simpler problem, and then we give the full, very complicated one. And then our negative mining, and which is that we try to give more emphasis of examples that are confidently classified by the model in a wrong way. So try to give more weight to this example for which the model is wrong and thinks to be right. And finally, the creation of what we call a border class to avoid that there are multiple detections close by. So we added a class around the animals that corresponded to its border. And by turning this into a kind of a multi-class problem, it regularized a little bit the learning process. So it's a lot of things, but in the end, we could have some performances that were actually pretty cool. And sorry for the little problems in the formatting on the left, but we had our first baseline. There was a paper we had in 2017, and that you can see here in blue, and it was an ensemble of exemplar SVMs where we could basically detect most of the animals. So we could get a recall of almost 100% that you can see here, but at the cost of having a very, very low precision. So which means, a 5% precision, it's for this data set, more or less 20,000 false detection to detect 1,000 animals. And by using this deep net trained with all these extra tricks, we were able to have a similar type of precision recall, so detecting most animals, but decreasing the number of false positive of basically an order of magnitude. So we're going from 20,000 false positive to a little bit more the data. So this was the state in 2018. I can tell you that nowadays we are mostly more or less here. So the model that we have now that involves some weakly supervised learning to add information about whether an animal is present or not, with the type of situations we are now close to do this curve here, which gives us a recall that is very interesting. So 85% more or less for a precision of something like 65–70%. So this is something that can be used by practitioners. And if we look at this in terms of predictions, so you can have the former SVM-based baseline that is basically the red predictions around here. So you see the model is predicting stuff everywhere, while the actual animals are the green squares. And the 2018 convolutional neural net corresponded to the blue predictions that reduce a lot the number of false positive. And this is cool because if you know that you are predicting almost all the animals but you have some kind of overprediction, it also means that the ranger needs only to check the predictions in order to get to a good result. And this means that it needs not to screen the whole data set, but just your predictions and to confirm or infer that. It seems like nothing, but something like this permits practitioner to reduce drastically the amount of time they spend correcting or verifying prediction. So in these studies here that was performed using the mega detector, that is a detection algorithm for wildlife developed at Caltech together with Microsoft AI for Earth. Well, the mega detector basically takes pictures taken in national park from camera traps and detects if there is an animal, if the image is empty, if there is a human or a vehicle. So if it's empty, you don't have to do nothing with that picture. And if the mega detector detects an animal, then only at that moment the rangers, in this case of the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, have to confirm if it's an actual wolf in this case. So it means that they have to look only into 10-15% of all the images, which allows the Idaho Department now to be on time with their camera trap image acquisition. So at the end of the year, they have gone through all the images they had, while before using computer vision technology, they were a few years behind. And I mean, imagine just what a big game changer this is for practitioners. So being able to keep up to the massive data that they receive because they have installed all these image acquisition devices, and also being able to do a conservation which is almost real time. And this is really the thing that we would like to achieve with those ideas. And there is not only detection. So I've been talking about detection so far, but there is a number of problems that are of super interest if you start to think about how to do computer vision and machine learning for conservation. So you can think about tracking, like in the example here on the left, where we are, where my colleagues are tracking foxes. And you can see we have a video, so we have a tracker on a video, and on the right we can also do 3D reconstruction. So can we, from single videos, making a pose estimation and reconstruction of the animal in 3D, so that we can then start rotating it, looking at a viewing angle that we don't have, and things like that. So these are also two examples. I wanted to show something that was not detection, but just to show you all the different super things that we can do with machine learning for animal conservation. Oof. So end of part 2. How well am I doing time-wise? Okay, I need to speed up a little bit. So Daniel, are there 1 or 2 questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions. So
go.
What would be your opinion on using depth analysis for helping with animal count with aerial images?
So monocular depth estimation, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
In our example, the terrain was quite flat. So it could be an idea, but I'm wondering whether this will bring a lot in the final detection task itself, because with a good detector we're already getting to a pretty good performance. So yes, we could, but it would have to be monocular depth estimation, because the animal will move in the middle. Yeah.
So the other thing is how do you avoid counting the same animal twice? You mentioned that earlier. It seems difficult.
It's tough. So on subsequent frames along the track on the drone, it's doable, because you can use like priors of position and like look at where the animal was before, and then assign it to a region of high confidence that could be related to motion or not. The big problem is when you turn around and come back. You're too far in time to using this type of priors, and for that, at the moment, I don't have a solution, to be honest. But just to make one thing clear, the estimations that they were doing in Cusicus before were based on an helicopter flight and people looking out of the window, counting the animals, and then extrapolating. We have been covering X% of the park. We have seen Y animals, so we have Z animals. So, even if we double count animals, we are very much more close to the actual population by doing so. So everything we can do here with learning is helpful, even though we are not exactly to the single individual precise.
That's really awesome. And final quick question, is this system being used right now in the field?
It is. So in Cousicous, they go every year and they repeat it. So now they even have started a foundation where there are different researchers that can come and try to deploy different systems. And we have been deploying that. I will show just a slide in a second to count birds in Western Africa. And so on the whole pipeline is something that needs to come from the practitioner themselves. But on the algorithmical side, I mean, mega detector is used. I mean, you've seen the slide before. So if you go back, by several nations, by actual department in America. So I mean, these are systems that are used in practice to make the management of natural reserves. And it's a good question because it allows me to go to my last part, which is closing the loop, which is basically how to do this final part of bringing this technological solution that we do in the lab and bring them to people that will actually use it. We have seen the example of the mega detector a second ago. I wanted to show you a second one because I'm pretty sure that most of you have seen this image and they've started to say, yeah, okay, Devis, but what about these 4 animals here on the right? I mean, you have missed them. Or, your model is not working well. Look, this is a tree and it's not an animal. And I 100% agree with you. This is wrong. So we need people that are there to help us correcting these predictions in an interactive way. They could tell us when we have been missing some example or where some of our predictions were clearly wrong. And to do so, I mean, the story is really to close the loop and go and look at what do ecologists really need. And so ecologists need to give value to the imaging campaign. They've been flying drones for years now, and they have them. But, it's difficult to bring that to the machine learning level because of the lack of matching between the technical expert and the field experts. And if you look at rangers, well, they need to go to the same park regularly to re-estimate the population and know where the animals are. And they don't like their images to be shared on the web. So that's one point that it's quite important, is that if we want to protect the rhinos, we do not have to put online where the rhinos are, because this is basically giving to the poacher all the information on where they should go. So that's also why, there is a kind of a federated learning flavor to all that. So we cannot really share the data with the locations. We did it once to get some labels, but that's about it. So with all these requirements in mind, we developed together with Microsoft AI for Earth what we call AID. And AID is our AI software tool that basically allows to do all that. So we can have several persons interested by the labeling effort that can access their own imaging campaigns, so they can upload their own campaigns. They can decide whether they're public or not. They end up in a database. But then there is a number of deep learning models that are already in there for detection, for counting, for semantic segmentation, and they are pre-trained and ready to use. But then we also have a system that it's constructed in a loop where we can have actually active learning and show to the people the prediction of the models. They can confirm or infirm the prediction, give new training data by looking at conflicting images and so on. And everything is computed in the cloud using the Microsoft Azure cloud. So you see, it's a system that basically runs for real. It's used by a bunch of people, and it can work at the image level on camera traps. It can work on drones for counting, for bounding boxes. You can even upload your remote sensing images and do blank cover segmentation if you like. So it's not only for ecology. We have built it with ecology in mind, but basically you can do all kinds of computer vision on that. And for me, I mean, the most important thing of all that is that it is 100% open source. So if you want to use it, you can. You just branch it from GitHub, and you can use it and develop further with us to have even better model. We are now setting up a marketplace where people can share models as well, and the idea is really to bring it up to speed where this is useful for a lot of people. And just to give you an example, I was promising an example about birds in Western Africa. So we were collaborating with the Quest University in Canada and also a drone company from which the name just escapes me at the moment. And we really could automatize the counting of birds, on islands in Western Africa, where we could basically reduce the time from 3 weeks for the manual counting to 4.5 hours, including training of the models. So, I mean, this is something where you can see the actual speed ups you can have, and we're not even talking about onboard processing yet. So this is really all done offline, and I think it showcases the potential of these type of approaches for actual ecological studies. Good. So let me just give you a couple of words of conclusion before we open the floor for questions again. And so I hope you have appreciated the importance of the field of wildlife conservation with machine learning and AI. So its conservation really needs machine learning. And the question is, I mean, does it also work the other way around? Because in the title, I promised machine learning supporting ecology, and this we have seen it, supporting machine learning, and this maybe we haven't seen it yet. But actually, I think that ecology has a number of problems that are interesting for machine learning per se, because there is a lot of domain knowledge that is out there, and it comes from millions of hours of field terrains and Charles Darwin studying the species and giving us everything about evolution. And these are things that we are not yet exploiting in our machine learning models. We are just scratching the surface of things like that. But all this prior knowledge is there. And, we could start by working on species taxonomies, for example, like in this paper here, when, in the loss function of a deep neural network, we start to encode the fact that different species are more or less similar in terms of genus or families or things like that. And by penalizing different errors depending on their proximity in the taxonomy, we can lead to better prediction. We also know that animals are located differently in space. So not all the species live everywhere on Earth. And it's not only space, but it's also time. As you can see here, this butterfly, this honeybee here. I mean, in January, it likes to be mostly here in America, but then in May, we observe them, a lot of them in Central Europe because they start to be active in those areas. So you see, all this knowledge exists, and it's just there to be encoded in terms of space and time where species are being observed. And last but not least is another paper that I like a lot. We also know something about predator-prey relations, for example, and all this knowledge of co-occurrence in space between species. So it's not only if the species is active in a certain place in a certain time, but are two species co-active in a certain place in a certain time. And there are observations on this. Imagine you could use your iNaturalist records to see that, and you could constrain your deep neural networks that start from environmental variables to predict species habitat distribution, and you can constrain them by this observation of which animals are there and which one steals the eggs of the others, or I don't know. And all these things you can encode them, and it can bring machine learning research to a whole new level when we are actually encoding knowledge from ecology into the learning algorithms. So remember, machine learning is very, very useful for application science, but the other way around, it also works. And I will now stop talking, and I would like also to thank the incredible people that I have the pleasure of working with in an almost daily basis. I mean, a selection of them is here. It's basically the person of all the different papers I've been discussing in these 45 minutes. But, it's a very exciting area. I hope that some of you will, find motivation to jump on the wagon and help us out, doing better animal conservation with technology, which is a great thing to do nowadays. Thank you very much. And if you have more questions, please shoot, and I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Devis. Really amazing talk. I have a personal question, which is, what do you think the role could be for on-device inference in this context?
I think there is a number of applications where this makes perfect sense. So the tracking one, for example, it's a super example. If you want to follow animals, the moment the drones approaches, animals move, and especially if you want to do re-identification, And given the re-identification, start to study behavior, like herd behavior versus individual, trying to locate sentinel animals, see how they react to threats. For all these things, you need to be able to follow animals. So like onboard detection devices will be super for that. So this is just one example that comes on, on top of my head where this would be amazing. Another thing is that camera trap networks acquire millions and millions of images. So storage is also a problem. So being able to, pre-process them on board before storing them will basically reduce drastically the storage requirements. So this could be also very, very good.
Awesome stuff. So a couple more audience questions, and please, if you've got any more questions, drop them in the Q&A tool. So one question, are the animals in these nature reserves being tagged? And if so, could the signals that are used for tracking the animals via tags be used to label data?
Sometimes they are. And some of my colleagues work with tags and coordinates of the GPS signal of the animal. The fact is that, some of the GPS system work up to a certain extent, and there is still a lot of processing that needs to be done. And things really work really out of the box. And also, the number of animals you can tag is limited, because especially when these are animals that are a little bit dangerous, you need to put them to sleep, tag them, and then they start going around. Then the sensor can malfunction. So it exists. It has been used a lot, and it still is used a lot in animal ecology. It is one thing that is used a lot. That's it.
Awesome. So another question. So the question was, is this also helpful in Indian forests? And I'll expand that question out to say, like, how much does the sort of context and distribution of the work you've already done constrain it when trying to roll out to new geography?
So let me just know if I understand well the question. So the question is how much these models are transportable to other geographies.
Yeah, and the techniques broadly.
The techniques, yeah. Up to a certain extent. Let's say, for example, with the AIDA software, I told before, we are building a kind of a marketplace, no? So this is really in the idea of sharing model across national parks, so that new person can start by existing model, but they still need to fine tune them to their own realities with a minimum of data acquired. Unfortunately, the problem of domain adaptations exists, and there is a reason if there are so many papers about domain adaptation at CVPR every year, is because it's a problem that it's not so well tackled, especially when we go to like real cases where the distribution of the classes change constantly from one application to the other, and the acquisition condition change all the time. The data set are not balanced. So all these things are very difficult to, when they are not controlled, they really make the work of the model super difficult. So I will say that yes, but with some caveats. So I think you always need to fine tune a little bit to make sure that you adapt to your local situation.
Another audience question, have you considered visual outlier synthesis for decreasing misclassifications of animals versus trees, etc.?
Visual outlier synthesis, that's interesting, actually. And we have a couple of works going in that direction, but not exactly that. So for example, at some point we were using 3D renderers to create like synthetic example of animals, like the ones we saw before in 3D, the zebra. And we were like having this 3D reserve, and we would just let the animal walk around, and then we had like a virtual drone flying around and taking pictures. And then we were using that to train our models. So this was one. So it's not really adversarial examples, but it was a way to augment our data set with things that were 3D animal textured with actual textures from real animals. And another thing that we didn't do ourselves, but I've seen it, was like people working on like adversarial examples. So try to like generating examples that are artificial, but close to decision boundaries so that they can refine boundaries of the classifiers.
Awesome. So I had one final question, which is that if people in the audience are interested in getting involved with these efforts to protect our ecologies, what are some ways that they can get engaged as experts in ML or tinyML?
So that's a good question. We have a Slack channel of ecology enthusiast machine learners. We have few hundreds of people there, and people are super excited. And the thing is that we have at the same time like terrain ecologists who want to get things done, and we have machine learning specialists who want to run super cool models. And thanks to this, we have a place where people can meet and talk. So one possibility would be to drop us a line and tell us that you want to join, and then we send you an invite for the Slack channel, which is really fun. And yeah, I think that's a first step. Then I think getting in contact is the first thing to do, because we're all super excited people about these topics, and we really like to share our experience and bring people on the wagon. So I mean, if you feel you want to make a difference in animal conservation, I mean, the best thing is just to drop us a line, and we'll make sure you get things to do.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Devis. This is an amazing talk. Really good engagement from the audience. So I'd like to thank again our tinyML Talks strategic partners: Aeon Devices, Arm, DeepLight, Edge Impulse, Emza, PhotoHub, Greenwaves, Gravity, HOTG, Imagimob, Itemis, ClickerTech, Latent AI, Maxim Integrated, Micro AI, NXP, Prophecy, Qualcomm, Kixo, Reality AI, Renesas, Rexen, SAP, Seed, SenseML, Sony Semiconductor Solutions Corporation, ST, Stream Analyzed, SynSense, and Sentient. If you'd like to be a sponsor, contact Olga at tinyml.org. I'd especially like to call out our executive strategic partners. So we have Arm AI, who are powering tinyML innovation; Edge Impulse, where I work, which is the leading edge ML platform; Qualcomm AI Research, who are advancing AI research to make efficient UI ubiquitous; Sentient, who provide end-to-end deep learning solutions for tinyML and edge AI. And then our platinum strategic partners, we have DeepLight, fast video analytics solutions on ARM CPUs; ClickerTech, Reality AI, Renesas, and our gold strategic partners, PhotoHub, Maxim Integrated, Latent AI, Micro AI, NXP, Seed, SenseML, ST, SynSense, and then our silver strategic partners: Aeon Devices, Emza, Greenwaves, Gravity, HOTG, Imagimob, Itemis, Prophecy, Kixo, Rexen, SAP, and Stream Analyze. Our next talk is on Friday, May 6th from Manivannan S., who's the lead engineer on the computer vision platform Valeo. His talk's going to be on Industry 4.0, predictive maintenance using Arduino Portenta H7 and Edge Impulse. And that webcast begins at 7 a.m. Pacific time. If you have a topic you'd like to share with the community, please reach out to talks@tinyml.org if you're interested in presenting. So thank you so much. Really appreciate everybody joining us today, and really appreciate our speaker, Devis. Amazing talk. We'll see you next time.